Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. I'm right now here in my grad study again during the time of Corona, interviewing a startup sponsored by Invest in Hessen. Sorry if I look a little bit disarrayed here. I've been traveling for the first time since Corona outbreak via train, and I had to keep my mask all the time on my nose. That said, I would like to welcome, of course, remotely, Ioannis here with me. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Jörn. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And apologies for everybody who hears in the background. My son, he has a lot of superpowers, including to be very cute and screwing up daddy's recordings as well, of course. That said, Ioannis, you are an entrepreneur based here in Frankfurt, Rhine-Main. But I've been stalking you a little bit on LinkedIn, and you've not always been an entrepreneur. I've seen you had let me get my cheat sheet called LinkedIn in here. You've been an investment manager, a project lead with Dow Jones. You have been head of IT. You have been in capital markets and trading systems at Market, which is a credit index company, head of indices. You've been with Deutsche Bank, and then you started to be an entrepreneur. That is actually a surprising CV. How did this happen?
Thanks, Jörn, for this nice introduction. And maybe I can put something on top of this. I'm actually a mechanical engineer by my studies, so which has nothing to do with anything of the before mentioned activities.
Oh, don't worry. A lot of people who are listening to us do have a background in tech, so you're not a minority here in the podcast, even though I'm a business guy.
Yeah, actually, and it's fun because actually I'm one of the few real engineers in the engineering and tech scene, because many also, of course, have studied informatics or similar studies, but of course there are a lot of self-trained and self-educated folks as well who have got additional skills. So basically, when after my studies, it was kind of difficult to get into my actual industry, mechanical engineering, automotive, or whatever. So, but it was quite easy to get into the information and trading systems industries. And basically, to cut a long story short, I gained more than 20 years of enterprise IT experience, mostly in banks. So I saw pretty much every angle in banks, from the front, middle to the back office, smaller but also very large companies, and I learned basically how to bring change through an organization and how to bring something into production. Basically, operating a technology for a business.
Sorry to interrupt you here, but we do have an audience which has a heavy background in financial services, but of course not everybody would know that. So talking about trading systems, so that means you have been the guy working on the actual systems you see in the trading rooms, like the hundreds of screens and all the big machines running underneath it. That is called the front office. Then you have the guys, for example, compliance, tradings, and so on and so forth, the middle office. Risk management, of course, and then finally you have the guys in the back office who actually make sure, for example, that the stuff the trader in the front actually traded is actually settled in their accounts, the money goes out, and so on and so forth. For everybody who'd like to learn more about this, go down here in the show notes. We'll have some links for further readings as well. Sorry to interrupt you, but we try to make it as educational as possible.
No, and absolutely, you're spot on. And yes, exactly. There's even a very interesting story that I was working in the cash and liquidity management of a large bank during the the first big financial crisis, where you had the names on a sheet of paper which were allowed to do which the bank was allowed to do transactions, and on another list where there was no allowance to do any transaction with these banks anymore. This was a very interesting phase where we did a lot of change in that bank. Yes.
One question: when you're referring to the past big financial crisis, it's not 1929, right?
No, this was a 2007, 2008, credit crisis, which everyone, let's say, refers to as a first financial crisis, of course. Yes, absolutely. Interesting, maybe something, a small, let's say, adventure into the VC industry around 2000, 2001, after my first tenure with Dow Jones. It was the time of the new market, and I got an opportunity to change into support, the first time to get to know startups from the financial and the funding side, and worked for a small team, and we consulted young technology and biotechnology or biomedical startups on fundraising activities, which was basically my first, let's say, foray into understand how young startups are born and funded, and how they grow or they don't grow. Obviously, the new market was basically, or the .com bubble at that time, around the 2000 to 2001 area, was, let's say, the first time where the internet became a big hype for investors and stock markets. A lot of first generation internet startups were born. Not all of them survived, but obviously remember that this was a time where I think 1997, Amazon, for example, went public. This was the time of AOL and CompuServe, and of course some other names, which some of them are still there and some of them didn't make it. And obviously there was a big, let's say, race in the stock markets back then. Young internet startups got a lot of valuations in the IPOs, and the trading continued, but at some point, the market obviously collapsed, and this was also one of the, huge crises. But obviously, as we all know, the internet has matured since then, and also the business models and the companies, the global businesses doing business through the internet. It's not only commerce that has, let's say, matured since then, but it's also, if you look at today, cloud services, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. These all, let's say, are, continuations of the things in technology that happened back then, I would say.
I think I do get a lot of the stuff you've been talking about, especially neuer Markt. New market was like the German .com area, and instead of Nasdaq, the Deutsche Börse completely shut the segment down, and that may have been one of the reasons why nobody wanted to get into startups so fast again after the 2008 financial crisis, because a lot of people had still been hit very hard in 2001 with a crash there, so that was maybe one of the reasons. That said, you have been there as well, and now the question is, how did you still decide to get into startups?
Sure. So a couple of years after this, almost 10 years basically, I started to work for Deutsche Bank, and did what I did before, a very large transformation project in the back office, in the payments, and the SWIFT messaging, as they say. SWIFT is this global network where all money transfers are happening, or most, not all, but most money transfers between institutional organizations in the financial markets are transferred back and forth. Basically, each euro that is wired, or most of the cents and euros that are wired from one place to another go via SWIFT. And after that project, after that finished, I started to work in the information security operations department, where I managed a lot of money for keeping the human capital, the experts, and the capex and the opex, so investments into our own technology, and the running costs of the technology that we used for running the systems, and building the capabilities and funding the operations for the information security operations of the bank. And this was a very, let's say, exciting environment, very dynamic, very agile, very adaptive. We were implementing what we say a risk-based approach. So trying to understand as much as we could about the threat landscape. That means threat landscape is, let's say, the attackers, the adversaries who are going after the customers, the employees, the assets, the data of the customers or the employees, or the VIPs, the board members, or the executives of the bank, or against the infrastructure, or against the supply chain of the bank. Because sometimes, when something is secured quite well, which a bank happens to be, then the adversaries or attackers are trying to get through the weaker links in the chain, which sometimes can be, one of the companies that is in supply chain, as we say.
I had an interview that I'll link below from the from the IT SEAL social engineering lab, and those guys are also talking about the weak link, and actually what they do is training the employees not to click on every link. And I just remembered when you said weak link, I remembered that they said the top management is usually the first to click on any link they get sent.
It's not that. It's not, it's not always, you can't say it's a specific persona that is clicking on something. Obviously, but what is important to understand is that in information security, things like what you just described, these colleagues are doing. Awareness training is, sending out phishing emails and hope that somebody clicks, and then trying to catch this, and not to blackmail somebody, but to educate people and make them better in avoiding these things, is what we call prevention. But the problem with prevention, which is great, and you have to do it, because a well-trained, employee, or well-trained employees are one of your best, let's say, barriers, or belong to the cyber hygiene, as we say. However, think of that it takes only one, let's say, case where this doesn't work, and then all your investments into prevention have failed, because this one click that is enough to basically derail or circumvent, or for the attacker to get around your prevention. Then he's in. Whatever you have done, you could have spent millions or hundreds of millions or billions to build up walls, and bigger walls and higher walls. But it's just like with the door. If the door is locked, the front door, the burglar will also check, is your garden door open? And if that's open, or you forgot your garden garden windows open, then he's in, however strong your front door was. And in order, to deal with this is what we call the, let's say, risk-based approach, is that you try to not only invest into prevention of cyber attacks to be successful, but you also invest into what we call detection. So being better and faster in detecting that something has happened, and then also be better trained and prepared to react or respond, as we say. Not react is the wrong word, really, to respond, find an answer to this, and minimize the damage, and over time, improve on these, what we say, capabilities. And this is let's say a more complete approach, where something like awareness or other prevention methods are part of it, but really the focus is on getting better also on detection and response, and supporting the business to keep going with the business, minimize the impact, minimize disruptions, minimize damage, and overall become faster in recovering from these situations, and basically more resilient against cyber adversaries or cyber attackers or digital threats, basically.
That means you're not only working on the actual software, you're also working on training of the people, and so actually on both important parts, right?
Yeah, it's basically there are a lot of things that you have to consider, and the easiest, or let's say one of the easiest things is to first understand what are the most critical assets that you need to protect, and what are the risks against these assets. Yeah, whatever that is, each organization has slightly different, way of doing their business, or a different set of assets, or a different kind of threat actors that are targeting them. So this is what you need to understand first, and then after you've understood what it is that you are protecting, then you look at the outside and say, who's capable of breaking things here and getting into my network, for example, and starting to either steal or blackmail me, or hurt me by shutting things down, or whatever their strategy might be, or exfiltrating data. And the threats can not only come from the outside, they also can come from the inside. Attackers or insider threats are, sometimes the same. An attacker who's capable, he might, try to get somebody into your organization, pretending he or she is working for you as a contractor or permanent employee, and then they start working from inside. So it's a quite complex situation that you will have to manage, and this is basically what we say is, let's say, this risk data driven approach, where we let's say basically have learned and understood that the adversaries, the attackers, are much more nimble than we are. They don't have any boss to ask, or objectives to fulfill at the end of the year. They have no promotion discussions, although maybe that happens in the underground as well. But they do this professionally, and this is what people don't understand is, it's not always that they come in and then do a lot of damage. No, one of their biggest strategies is to come into an organization, into their infrastructure, and then persist, as we say, and be there and install as many backdoors as they can, directly or indirectly through their, through the supply chain, and use them when they need it. And for this, they have built up, really a fine-grained, let's say, business infrastructure, where really one is developing a piece of malicious code, and they assemble from many pieces of software their, let's say, attack tools. Then there's infrastructure, then there's the scammers, and there's, physical, there's whatever you can think of. And for each, let's say, attack or campaign, they really put this together with, and it doesn't cost them a lot. It costs them maybe a few €100 or dollars to build an attack campaign. And the effort on the other side is millions sometimes, in order to understand this kind of attack or campaign, and build up the infrastructure and the capabilities. And capabilities always, people, process, technology, in order to make sense, to understand all of this, to be able to have the capability to detect and be trained to respond. Go ahead. Yeah, you have a question.
Yes, I'm always smiling because I've been very frequently working with very talented people from forensics, from my employee who pays my salary, as well as people from cybersecurity. And I always think when I'm talking about them, I'm glad that they are on the good side, because they would make amazing criminals. Do you also have to have the same talents there?
There's a saying. It takes a thief to catch a thief. Yeah, it's really what I mentioned is, attackers are devious. As you may have seen in this current health crisis, COVID, attackers even go after health institutions or hospitals. They don't basically care that they are doing more damage to people who have already, health problems, for example. They just are very devious and they have just one goal. Most of the times, 80 or 90%, it varies per study, is just to make financial gains. Yeah, and you see that a lot of, for example, there was a report recently that during the COVID crisis, the search terms on Google and other search engines of how to hack, or what does it take to become a hacker, really leapfrogged, because a lot of people who were probably not earning a lot of money went out of jobs and were looking for alternative sources of income, and thought, oh, let's become a hacker and make an income as a hacker, because they probably read that somebody else was doing fine with this kind of a job. Obviously, not everyone who was searching for this will eventually become, because it does probably take some skills. But the thing to notice is that many people cannot imagine what these guys are capable of today with little effort, and what they are actually really doing. They if they can attack you, they will attack you, and in most cases you won't even notice that you have been breached and that something is in your organization persisted and just waiting, with many backdoors, just waiting for real hacker groups or individuals or organizations to be utilized for their advantage.
What I have in mind from talking to some of the hackers, like on the good side, I assume, is that there is a lot of information out there they can use to make their attacks more plausible, more believable, more like real. For example, for German companies, you find a lot of inside information, for example, on stuff like LinkedIn or the websites you can evaluate your employers on, like in Germany, Kumu, like Glassdoor in the US or stuff like this, as well as you can just look into the private feed of Twitter, Instagram, and so on and so forth of the employees you're trying to target. And if there's something that looks like an animal clinic that has your animal has an emergency, it's very likely people will click on it. So where is the best information source for you where you actually find a lot about companies there?
So there's not one single source, and that's what people what is also one of the biggest challenges. It's basically, again, from you have to start from your requirements, from your most critical assets, which depends on your business that you are doing and conducting, and even your operational footprint is important. Your M&A activity is important. So when you buy new companies or divest, this changes your threat profile. So basically, from the definition of the threat profile and formulating the most high-level requirements that you can think of, you start to break them down into sometimes a framework that we call MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is an approach to structure the phases of an attack, and from there, so this is basically the techniques, describing the techniques, trying to standardize the description of the techniques that the attackers are doing, and then from there you start to select the sources internally as well as externally, which we call externally we call intelligence, and internally it's a variety of sources that can come from various systems, and try to depict on which of these sources gives you the best information to fulfill your mission to protect your infrastructure as good as possible. So bringing you into a position to have adequate cyber hygiene, to have adequate prevention, or invest or leverage the investments into prevention technology that you may have, but also start to work with external information about threat actors, which there are many, but you have to break it down, make it specific, contextualize, as we say, enrich it, so that when something is going on, you can have or get to situational awareness very quickly. It sounds complex, but it must not be. It's just you have to. This is what we call this risk-based or intelligence or data-driven approach. Is that you start to process and evaluate the relevant information that you need to know of, and also because this is not a static process, you have to also consider that your adversaries or the attackers are advancing in their capabilities, are developing new tools, and this also affects your threat landscape. I'll give you an example that, for example, think of DDoS, for example, which is a distributed denial of service kind of attack that was very popular a couple of years ago, which was basically, used by attackers to bring your website down so it's not responsive by throwing a lot of traffic into it. Okay, so basically a couple of years ago you would have invested into DDoS protection, which is available now. Something new has come up, which is called ransomware, for example, and ransomware follows the same kind of principle, but even more devastating because it's shutting your operations down. Not only your website, but it can completely shut down your operations if they manage to encrypt critical parts of your systems. So and the added benefit for the attacker is that they can make money out of it. With DDoS, they could only shut you down, but now they can make money with the decrypt, with you having to pay ransom for getting a decryption key, hopefully, and hoping that this will work. So this is an example for how the threat landscape and the methods of the attackers have evolved, which require also the defendants to adapt their cybersecurity, information security program to be able to cope with these kind of developments on the adversary side. So, and this is again, there's no single source of information. It's multiple, and if you cannot process this on your own, you have to work and collaborate with with partners, sometimes peers, sometimes external companies like like us or others, and select the most, let's say, and learn how to select them or direct your investments into these, into the capabilities, build up capabilities, maintain capabilities that really help you deliver against your mission, which is always protecting the most critical assets that you have as an organization.
I understand. And we have to tell our audience that you guys are not only one startup, but actually some time ago, you actually split your startup up a little bit more, which you can explain soon. But just before that, what you've been saying, was this one of the drivers that actually got you to split the company?
So basically, when I was working in that bank with my partner, we saw a need for one of the biggest problems that we had. So in order to get situational awareness of what's going on, we do investigations, and investigations is basically, think of it like a murder case, where you come to the murder scene, and there's just a corpse, and you don't know anything of what has happened. And as you know, some of these cases are take years to get clarified, and this is very similar to how the cyber investigation takes place. Something is going on in your network, and you have no idea what is going on. In some cases, when there's something that you have maybe seen before, you have some better idea, but in many cases it's really difficult to make sense of what is going on, because guess what? That's the strategy of the attacker. That's their job, basically. And really, and this is even they use a strategy where they use the same tools but slightly modify it so that your systems, who are looking at fingerprints or other technical means of trying to compare to something that we've seen before, is that it increases your effort to understand, is this part of something that I have seen before, or is this something completely new and more dangerous or more targeted or whatever. So this is why, on the one side, this risk-based approach with the use of not only internal but also external information is one of the tools, but another is collaboration, exchange of information with others. It can be internally in an organization, the other teams, or it can be outside of the organization. It can be law enforcement, it can be industry peers, it can be even competitors. It can be, let's say, your one of your vendors. It can be one of your service providers. It can be, let's say, any other entity, communities or basically other sources of information. But the problem that we saw was that this collaboration with others was extremely difficult to operationalize. Yeah? It was happening every day, manually. So via email, you call other people and you discuss with them, but it wasn't really institutionalized. So we thought, what if you have a platform that allows you to consume all the relevant data that I described is coming from your sources or source systems, internally or externally, fuse them together, give all the tools that you need to apply for analytics, and also, if you want, collaborate with others on these cases, as we say, to help you do your job faster. Basically, put the pieces of the puzzle together faster. Identify, let's say, artifacts information or data that you've collected that comes from an attack, and understand, okay, this is a little bit obfuscated, but basically part of something that we've seen already. So we know what to do next. Yeah, if there's a critical situation, or make a decision. No, this seems like something new, and now we need to actually, call these forensic guys that you've worked with, who go to a machine and do deeper analysis and then bring you back that additional information. So and this really sounds like simple, but imagine that you have an extremely high, let's say, volume of data and extremely high volume of cases every day, even in small or medium-sized organizations where you have to make these decisions. So we thought that there was a market for this. This was basically the trigger for founding Quoscient, and we started. We found investors to help us get started, and hire a couple of developers to start developing this tool, this platform, which exists today. We started around 4 years ago, 2016. The product is now, in the market. It's called Collab. Collab stands for collaboration, and is exactly this collaborative fusion and analysis and investigation platform. And in the course of developing this, we obviously we've founded or established 2 more teams. One was an intelligence, co-intelligence is the company called. It's a team that does exactly what I described. They produce finished intelligence, as we say, which is a ready-to-consume product for decision makers, a redacted information product that informs decision makers about their threat landscape, following a very methodical and differentiated process. They also deliver you written report, like you can read in a newspaper, really redacted information, but obviously specific to cyber risks. And this is basically a product to help you as an organization consume this and start to work, obviously with tools like Collab, but also with co-intelligence to be able to understand your risks and reduce the risk of digital threats. And then a third business line, which is, let's say, security architecture and engineering and consulting and specialized incident response capability. And these three product lines that we built made up Quoscient. Obviously, to come back to your question, you start as a startup, you develop some very technical stuff, and then you also have to understand how to commercialize and market these things and this is something that you learn over time, where you test the market, where you find your product market fit, and obviously it's never as you thought it would be. So at the end of basically last year, we found that the target markets, the target customers for all three entities were slightly different and also had territorial differences. For example, our technology was, we found that, for example, there was a lot more demand in the United States for it. So we decided to, with the other teams, to basically give each of the teams the freedom to cater for their peculiarities. It's hard to pronounce this word. So giving them independence while retaining the motivation and obviously the ability to work together, but also being able to go after their own main target prospect and customer base more independently. So we founded CoLab Technologies. It's now based in Maryland. We founded Co-Intelligence. It's still based in Frankfurt, and CoSec also still based in Frankfurt.
Don't worry, that finally leads me to the question, because you guys may remember from like 35 minutes ago, this is a long interview, but I actually enjoy it. You remember this interview is sponsored by Invest in Hessen, and you now split your startup into 3 startups, of which 2 are actually still based in Hessen. Could you elaborate a little bit on why?
So for why they are still in Hessen, or why we made this move to the US for
why they are still in Hessen?
Sure. No, I mean this. They so both teams have, let's say, local customers. Also, CoLab has also local customers here in Germany, not necessarily in Hessen, but the teams come from here. We were able to secure our investor from Frankfurt and also the infrastructure that we found here and the ability to, let's say, find office space and good infrastructure and good access to candidates was at the time and still best here. So we at some point, there's an anecdote that we thought we might get more developers if we looked for them in Berlin, but that wasn't the case. We were much more successful for finding people who wanted to be here in Frankfurt. So and still, when I said CoLab moved to the United States, it doesn't mean that all the people move. We still have a good chunk of the team working from here. So and they work together with their US colleagues, which we always had. We always had colleagues in the United States. And a big other, let's say, plus is that we have been working together with HTRI, the Hessen Trade and Invest team, for now more than 2 years, I think, and they are very supportive for us. They help us, very proactively, and of course, this is one of the reasons to be here, to stay here.
I see. And we usually interview on this channel startups that are beyond Series A stage. Are you guys currently looking for venture capital funding?
Not at this time. So we have had the luck that we have found our investor and then who keeps funding the companies. So right now we're not out looking for funding. We're concentrating on the commercialization of the product at this time. So marketing and sales and converting, a pipeline or leads into additional customers. We're obviously looking for more customers. We're open for discussions for onboarding and supporting more customers at this time, and funding is something that might open up as a discussion later in the year or maybe next year.
And for everybody who's not listening to this instantly, because we recorded it just a few days before the publication, they could still reach out to you. Go down here in the show notes. There's a link of your company website as well as your personal LinkedIn profile. And from the company website, you can find all the different entities as well as ask you personally. I would like to thank you very much for this very extensive interview. I really enjoyed it. Hope to see you again, and best of luck for all the companies.
Thank you very much. Can only echo. It was very fun to talk to you tonight.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.